Hello, hello. Oh,
Oh,
our group slowly coming in. Welcome. Lisa, hello. Nice to see you again.
Yeah,
And
nice to be back. Good to
yes,
see you, Janet.
Happy New Year. And Claudia, welcome. And Chris, I always am interested in Chris's images. Chris, is there a story behind the images you pick?
yes. Hi, Jonathan.
Hey,
Today's image is, I'm sure you're too young to recognize it, but it's a picture from 1967 and my hero, Dave Keon in the Stanley Cup.
yeah. Yeah, it's a little bit before my time, but not much. And I have an older brother who was really into hockey, so when I was little, I had certainly heard the name, yeah. Although in our house there were other legends. There were, my dad was sort of the Gordie Howe, Bobby Hull kind of ilk.
Okay. Yeah,
So
they were the superstars, and Dave Keon, he was just a superstar, certainly with me and Leaf fans. And that was the last time they won the cup in '67. So
yeah,
he was quite a very good example of a skilled player who won an award for his skills, and he was a very good example. Let's just say that. And yeah, he was my hero when I was a kid.
awesome. Well, thanks for sharing that. Welcome to the gang. I see people are kind of trickling in. And so for the new faces, I think we don't have a lot of new faces today. In fact, we're a little bit light today, which is kind of nice actually for what I have planned. I think Ashley there, I don't know if you've been with us, but wherever you are, Ashley, hello, welcome. And Claudia, I believe you've been with us before, right? I don't know if you're able to come back in and say hi. Claudia, we've met, right?
No, it's my first time.
Is it your first time? Oh, for some reason you seem very familiar. Well, bienvenidos and welcome.
Thank you.
Where are you coming from? Or where are
I
you
live in
calling from?
Alameda, California, but I'm originally from Medellin, Colombia.
Very nice. Well, we're thrilled to have you here. Ashley is there in the Florida Keys. Hello, Ashley. Welcome, welcome. Oh, Heidi Thompson is coming in the room. And of course, all of our, I won't say old favorites, that's not the right word. Joni's here. Hi, Joni. And Barbara and Carrie and Leona. We missed you for a little time there, but it's nice to have you back. So for the newer folks, particularly Claudia and Ashley, we always like to keep a kind of a community feel to what we do here. So that means, the first 5 minutes are just like this. People kind of trickle in and we do a little greeting and small talk. And then typically we get into a combination of some consistent elements. I do some teaching. We have usually something that's more experiential, like a meditation or a prayer. And then there's typically a theme or topic of the day. Sometimes I say more, sometimes I say less. And then usually there's time for either a lot of group interaction and sharing, or at the very least some questions and comments. So that's more or less our format. Oh my goodness, look who's coming in. Now I will say, just to take a couple more minutes of introduction, until February 20th, we will be talking a lot about spiritual experience, because on February 20th, you will see the release of my new book, Spiritual Experience. And I see Jenny Simon. Hello, Jenny. I'm so glad you're here. For those of you that haven't gone to Barnes and Noble or Amazon yet, this is a little bit of what the book cover looks like. This is my galley copy. And it's got a really good foreword. You should check that out. There's a secret. You need to check it out and tell me who did the foreword. best forward I could have ever asked for. So what I'd like to do today is to actually kick off some of the sharing about the book. And maybe after an opening meditation, I'd like to sort of just talk a little bit about why this book came to be, or how the book came to be, and then walk you through what I see as seven of the most essential spiritual experiences, and sort of talk a little bit about, like, why did I pick them? Because what you'll find when we get into it is that some of them, I believe, are happening all the time to all of us everywhere. And then you'll find that some of them are quite spectacular and unusual, and yet they're all included because well, I'll tell you why they're all included. But as a little foreshadowing, you know, they're all included because they are all things that are accessible. They are all things that I think should be familiar to us, whether we've had those experiences or not. I think these 7 experiences are informing the spiritual literature that we read, the religious traditions that we see, the spiritual practices around the world. So that's just sort of a little bit about that. And then I would really like to talk about your experiences. And I'd love to hear some reactions to the top 7 that I'm going to identify. I would love to hear, because we're a smaller group today, substantially smaller. I would love to hear from any or all of you, which of these you might relate to, maybe some more than others. So if we stay a small group, you're certainly welcome to pass. You don't have to come on camera if it doesn't work for you, but I'll probably try to drag everyone into it. Having said that, are there any questions or special requests before we take a dive? Yeah, Barbara, go ahead.
Now, can you hear me?
Yes.
Did you choose the number 7? Or did it
I will
of?
say it chose itself,
Okay.
right? I tried to let the material sort of dictate the form. However, it is true, I tend to look for numerical patterns, and 7 is one that I personally prefer, and 7 is also pattern, as you know, which is why you asked. 7 is a remarkably universal number in spiritual traditions.
Yeah.
So whether it's the 7 Catholic sacraments, or whether it's the 7 rites of the Lakota Sioux, or the 7 sacred directions, or the 7 chakras, you know, and we can go on and on. That 7 is a persistent pattern we see in the spiritual world. Now, I will also say, just as an author, you know, you start going beyond the number 7 in a list, and it just becomes like not really a list anymore. It's just like too many things, right? Top 10, 10's nice, but who can really remember 10? So, so, you know, 3, 4, 7, those tend to be pretty good spiritual and functional numbers. So
Okay.
that's just a fun. Did you want to add anything to that?
No, just curious.
Curious? Okay. Anyone else have any just sort of general comments before we go a little deeper, or a lot deeper? So what I'm going to do today, I typically do either a guided meditation, and we use imagery and imagination to kind of explore something in our inner world, or we do something that is really more like a prayer. And my prayers are typically inclusive and eclectic, and people are welcome to handle that the way that works for you. But today I think I'm going to just do a little bit of a blend, because that's what I'm feeling. So please participate in your own way. And if nothing else, use this as a time to slow down, to get centered, to get quiet. And with that, I'm going to invite you, even if you're busy puttering around your office or doing dishes or whatever, I'm going to invite you to take just a moment and close your eyes with us. I'm going to invite you to sit comfortably but alert. And if you're like me, it really helps for a short meditation to put one hand, I usually put my right hand on my heart, my left hand on my belly. Physically, this invites the nervous system to slow down, to regulate, to move into a parasympathetic state. Energetically, we're kind of balancing the foundational energies of our life down in our gut, our belly, towards our root, with the center of our energy, our hearts, our center of love and healing. So I like to bring some awareness to that. With your eyes closed, still, sitting comfortably but alert, drawing a deep, deep breath in. I invite you to hold that for just a moment. Notice what you're feeling, thinking, sensing, and then breathe it out through your mouth fully. And then do that a few more times. Big breath in through the nose, any old way. Hold it, and take this moment to be aware, to observe, to feel whatever you're feeling. And then exhale, long, slowly, completely. And as you continue this process, I encourage you to really focus on that exhale, as long and full an exhale as you can until your stomach muscles contract. And then little by little, allowing the inhale in through your nose to be gentler and softer. And then out through the mouth, long, slowly, fully. Allow your awareness of stillness and silence to grow within you, around you. And sensing with eyes closed that this stillness holds us all together, holds us all equally. And as we sense and know this stillness and this silence, we affirm that we are together wherever we are, whenever we hear this, we are together. And we are surrounded by the presence that has always been, that always will be. This stillness that is around us is the very same stillness that has existed for billions and billions of years in all directions. From this place, we feel connected. We feel the loving impulse towards our lives, each other, and our world. And so each in our own way, but together as one, we feel and offer a prayer for this moment, for each other, for all things. Within the one that is all, dear God, our source, substance, to the mystery, our consciousness, knowable by endless names and no names, we are grateful today. Grateful for another day to live, another day to learn, to love, to help, to heal, and to grow as souls in this human journey. Today, we take this moment to be grateful for all that we forget to be grateful for the littlest things, for any measure of beauty in our lives, for any measure of mystery, for any measure of connection, love, friendship, family, any measure of it all, at all. We give thanks for the simple things that fuel our bodies and move our lives forward, for the food that we find on our table day after day, the roof over our heads, and opportunity. The countless choices we have every day to go where we want, do what we want, live as we want, and we cherish this freedom and know that it is not universal. From this place of gratitude, we offer our blessing for those that live in fear, for those that live in a lack of safety and security, for those whose physical health is uncertain through war and terror, poverty, exclusion, illness. Whatever brings us to the edge of our humanity, whatever robs us of spirit and hope, whatever threatens the wholeness of anyone, we pray for that to be lifted, to be transformed into loving awareness, into ending suffering, into letting go of control and greed. Together we pray for peace. And we find this prayer in our hearts like a soft glowing light. Each in our own way, we envision, imagine, feel this energy that is more than us, that is before us and after us, that lives in us, the loving impulse of life, of existence. We feel this light right now in the very center of our bodies. And with our breath and with our allowing, it grows. Imagining that now, the color, the energy, whatever way you can sense it, feel it, create it, connect with it. This beautiful, eternal power of life. Feel it flowing through your whole body. It is the life force in every cell. It's coursing through your veins. You might see it like an actual light now flowing down to the tips of your toes, up to the top of your head, in your face, in your brain, in every organ of your torso, flowing out through your arms to your hands and fingertips. We see ourselves radiant and glowing with this loving light. And we breathe it out into the world, filling the room that we're in and beyond the walls, using the power of our prayer, our love, our intention, our imagination, seeing this imperceptible, perceptible energy as it flows out through the streets around us, through neighborhoods, cities, across the landscape, Imagine this force, radiant, vibrant, flooding around our globe, across and deep into the oceans, across and high above the mountains, through deserts, finding every heart everywhere, human, animal, creatures, tiny, enormous, plants, stones. Feel our entire world, our entire planet in this moment through our prayer, through our vision, vibrating with a higher love that moves us all towards wholeness and balance. And you can savor that. You can let it radiate out and beyond into the cosmos. You can find people or places or things that you feel need this more right now, this light, this love. And we'll just take a moment to hold the energy wherever you feel it needs to go, even into yourself, parts of your body, your mind, your heart. And knowing that this light will continue as we bring this prayer to a close, we affirm all that is of the light and we release anything that is not of the light into the light. And so we trust, we let go, and we give thanks. Amen. And take a few moments, if you like, just to sort of feel wherever you're at now or whatever you need another moment with. And then when you're ready, of course, come on back to the room. All right. So thank you very much for being with me and joining me in that, joining us in that. Yes, Leona, what would you like?
Hello. Yeah, I have a question about your new book. Is
What?
it similar to Return to the Sacred? And if how is it similar and different?
Yeah, well, that is
Yeah.
exactly where we're heading next. So let's just dive in. It's similar because I wrote it. And so the sort of tone of positive spiritual capacity and possibility, I think, is pervasive. I think there is a kind of drive towards wholeness and normalizing the spiritual world that is also present. But I would also say it is a completely different book, extremely different. And I know, I don't know if any, well, Joni for sure has read it. Joni's read, I think, both books. Have you read it? Did you read, Barbara, did you read Spiritual Experience? Or you read Return to the Sacred? You're muted, but I know Spiritual Experience isn't published yet. So
No, I read Return of the Sacred.
yeah, okay. So a little, I don't know if I haven't decided if I'm going to share this.
Yeah,
Great.
the reason why I ask is because Return to the Sacred also has the 7 things going on.
No, okay. So Return to the Sacred, for people who don't know, and maybe what I should do is just give the short answer and then get into the experiences, because I tend to give the long answer. So Return to the Sacred reviews 12 spiritual practices that we find persistently in cultures, traditions, religions, and movements around the world and throughout time. And those 12 practices are divided into 4 types. So the idea is that whether we look 5,000 years ago or 5 years ago, it's pretty unusual to find any spiritual practice of substance that doesn't fall into these 12 categories. So they're organized as physically oriented practices, mentally oriented practices, emotionally oriented practices, and strangely, spiritually oriented practices. So just quick review for people who don't know. The physical practices, this is now a test for me. The physical practices are ceremony, music, and movement. And the idea is that if you don't have a body, it's hard to do those 3 things, right? So yes, they are holistic in that they can affect you mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, but we are describing a type of practice, meaning this is the attraction for people who are physically oriented, or that's the dominant mechanism. The emotional practices, having a guru or being in a teacher sort of mentor relationship, being a devotee of a divine incarnation or character, that, for example, devotion to Mother Mary, devotion to Krishna, devotional practice, or service, right? So being of service to others. All those things require highly relational orientation. Then we have the mental. So there's meditation, there's prayer, and then there's sacred study. Again, these 3 things are not the same, but they all require a highly cognitive capacity. Of course, if you don't really have thoughts, then maybe you might argue that you're naturally meditating, but meditation is very much a mental game. So is prayer, and so is sacred study. And then the last 3 are the death practice, which is, the last 3 are really complicated to explain, but when we use death and dying, being with it, contemplating with it, and related activities to actualize our spiritual awareness. The ascetic practices, which are typically about doing without, right? Without food, without water, without sex, without company, those sorts of things, to better understand soul and self. And then the last one is the life practice, in which, though we may all claim to do it, it's probably the least commonly fully done, which means we use quite literally every moment of every day as our practice. And that includes when everything goes badly. So Return to the Sacred is very specifically about things to do. Now, spiritual experience, really, I do talk about things to do, and there are examples of things you can do to cultivate the experiences. The entire focus of the book is on what happens internally when we do spiritual practices, or when we're on a spiritual path, or what may happen spontaneously that we may overlook. So spiritual experience, and this is where we were headed. I'm going to hop over here to share a screen. Spiritual experience is a review of these 7 categories of experience. So the book describes, as is kind of my style, through story. Now, I use personal experiences as well as the experiences of others to illustrate what these 7 types of spiritual experience are. I'm going to explain them to you in just a moment. So it's not meant to be an academic book, although you could find an academic book about every one of these. It's not meant to be exhaustive on any one of these, because you can certainly find books that are exhaustive about each of these. But what it does is it puts them together in a way that you can begin to sense the availability of these experiences and the interplay, which will make more sense in a moment. I use a personal experience of each of the 7 so that the reader can feel it for themselves in a way, vicariously. Now, I believe everyone on this call has had some of these experiences. And maybe some of you have had all of these experiences. That's awesome. Some of us tend more towards one type or another. And some of these few of us will ever have. And that's totally normal, totally okay. The value of the book for me is that I think that spiritual experience is more common than people realize, more important than people realize. And if we don't have language to talk about it, and if we don't have the capacity to kind of recognize it and affirm it, then very often these things come and go and we lose their gifts. We don't experience their value, because ultimately it's my belief that each one of these is teaching us something about what it means to be human. Each one of these things is teaching us about the universe and our place in it. Each one of these things is teaching us about our capacity to be in the world and what we can experience. And if we're busy dismissing these things, undermining these things, not believing in these things, or just simply not paying attention, then I think that these kinds of things are frankly coming and going from our lives without us even knowing, in particular, the first few. So I'm going to do a little review, but I wonder before I do the review, and I'm going to try to do the review pretty efficiently so we can get into your stories and comments and illustrations. Does anyone else want to jump in with a question or comment? No? For real? Okay. Let's go back to our slide. Okay. So truth and beauty. The experience of truth and beauty is probably the most ordinary of experiences. I think they're experiences that we all have frequently, and yet they're often not called spiritual. And I don't think they're often held for very long. So moments of truth and beauty for me really relate to present moment awareness and mindfulness. Moments of truth and beauty are moments in a day in which something simple or regular or ordinary suddenly becomes vital, vibrant, and somehow connecting, inspiring, uplifting. So it can be as simple as waiting for a bus, and you're caught up in your day and you're rushed, and you finally get to the bus stop and you didn't think you were going to make it. And there's just this moment of relief. And suddenly, for the first time, instead of, let's say, being afraid of the cold all day and rushing your errands, and it's just an illustration, you stop and you realize how quiet the street is. You notice the snow falling gently, and your eye catches the shining crystals of each flake, and you just have a little moment that takes your breath away. You just see how beautiful things are. And then the bus comes and you quickly get off, put your phone in your pocket and grab your bags and get on. Or you may be, getting ready for bed, and you have a moment just before drifting off where there's just a pervasive sense of peace in the room. And rather than feeling lonely, you just feel alone, which is different, right? You feel a quiet connection with life through your aloneness, right? Not loneliness, but your all oneness, right? So typically truth and beauty moments are little aha moments, little moments of gratitude, little moments that just feel special. They can be sensual moments. they are typically moments in which our senses feel heightened. And the reason why I call that a spiritual experience is because if you pay attention to those, if you string those together, if you cultivate those, there is little more you need to develop a rich spiritual life than that. Because these experiences evoke gratitude, they evoke connection, they evoke a sense of wonder. And it's just the little things, and it typically happens through present moment awareness. Now, for the sake of time, I'm just going to zip through these, and then we'll open it up to the group, hopefully in just a few minutes. Ordinary magic are experiences of the unexplainable in everyday life. So that might be someone, Jan has shared, for example, her work with people who have been given a cancer diagnosis over the years. And in this work, what we find is that there are people who have been told that they have a very short amount of time to live, and then against all odds and all science, cancer goes into remission and doesn't come back for years and years. So what is that? It's a mystery. Is it a miracle? Is it dumb luck? Is it something explainable that we don't yet understand? There are these moments that they're ordinary, but they're magical at the same time. Extreme synchronicities, that you might not only be thinking about someone and they call you, but I once had an experience. This is a crazy thing that actually happened. I once had an experience of thinking about someone all morning while I was traveling, and I actually ran into that person, even though I was from a different part of the country and they were from a different part of the country, in the same airport. Like, what is that? So ordinary magic is typically something that feels unexplainable. And yet, it's not like fireworks are going off and you're not, seeing into another dimension. It's just some part of ordinary life that feels magical or miraculous. So that's a generalization. Experiences of the spirit world, fairly self-explanatory. That's when we, in dream or vision, encounter beings that are not in bodies. So the visitation of a deceased loved one in a vision in your home or in a dream. Now, this is a bit controversial, but I would even include experiences of divine beings in the spirit world experiences. It's basically an experience of any kind of spirit. Experiences of the cosmic self typically are things like out-of-body experiences, meditative experiences that become visionary, in which we see ourselves in a kind of elevated form. So we might see ourselves as an energy being, or we might see ourselves in another time and place. We might have like a past life regression. I would include some of those experiences in the cosmic self. In dreams, flying, being in other dimensions, but with your body and awareness. Those would be cosmic self. Divine energy is typically without, so we cross a threshold from 4 to 5, and we're now moving into less or no bodies, less or no identities, and it's now energies. And that's just the way it sounds: color, form, vibration, very spacey, very psychedelic. And while those things are typical of psychedelic experiences, they also happen spontaneously. They happen in meditation. They can happen during exercise. They can happen painting, singing, having sex. All kinds of things will open people to a moment of perceiving or sensing energy. Now, experience of the formless spirit is typically where we feel the presence of God, or what is the equivalent of God. We feel the presence of ultimate reality, but it's not a being. it's not an energy. It's more like a presence. So it's formless. And so you might feel in a moment of looking up into the night sky, or again, in a moment of meditation or any practice, a presence that has no form, but is substantive, is vital, is vibrant, is with you, and communicates typically love and omniscience and omnipresence. And for example, in the Christian tradition, that would be like the Holy Spirit. Okay, or this is typically where we talk about purely mystical experiences, where we see the ultimate nature of reality, or we experience something that we could call God or consciousness directly. The difference between formless spirit and pure consciousness, however, is that in the formless spirit experience, we are experiencing it. So we feel its pervasiveness. We know we are a part of it, but there is still a measure of self-awareness or self-perception in the experience of it. It may be the ultimate reality, but we are within it. In the experience of pure consciousness, and as you can guess, the rarity of these experiences goes from 1 to 7. Typically, these are what in Hindu tradition they would call Maha Samadhi. These are the high awakening experiences in which we even lose consciousness of subject and object. So there is now no longer me observing the formless spirit of the universe. I become the formless spirit of the universe, or the formless spirit of the universe becomes me. All boundaries in perception dissolve. And so it is very complicated to describe. And in the academic literature, it's talked about as an experience that is innately inexplicable, innately ineffable. You can't put words to it. And it is typically an experience I can share in which you are not typically even really aware you're having the experience while you're in the experience. Such is the dramatic loss of the individuated self. So you're not asleep, but you're not awake in any ordinary form. There's kind of a consciousness that is simply existing, and it's typically only just as it comes on and as you exit that you even have any reflective capacity that it's happening or happened. Although kind of like being, I don't know, passing out and falling into the swimming pool, when you come out of it, you're saturated with it. So the awareness is with you, the feeling is with you. And as I was saying, typically at some point in it, typically as you're exiting, the memory is there. But while you're immersed, there's typically a complete dissolving of self, and ultimately an absolutely non-dual, non-being experience. And those are the Super 7. So I'm going to just stop because I've talked lots, and I would love to hear, of course, questions are welcome, but I'd love to hear from the group if there's an experience that you tend towards, or how you relate to these things, or can you illustrate something? Now, I appreciate that we could spend hours hearing even just one story, but I wonder if any of you would like to, give a little color to some of these things. And that could be just something like, well, I remember 3 days after my grandfather died, I had a dream and I know he was there. That would be an example of the spirit world. Or I remember when I first learned to do energy healing, I had a dream in which I saw the energy body, and that would be like divine energy. So before I pick on anyone, does anybody want to jump in and either volunteer an illustration or ask a question or something else? Jan, please take it away.
I had an experience. I had a boyfriend who was killed in a snowstorm, in an avalanche.
Wow.
And I really wanted, it was in my 30s, I really wanted to communicate with him. And I was thinking about going to a medium of some kind because I wanted to know what was his experience like. And then I had a dream. He came to me very clearly in a dream, and he said, if you want to communicate with me, just do it. You don't need an intermediary. You can just talk to me directly.
There you go. Well, that's brilliant. And how did you, I'm curious, how did you feel about that? And did that stay with you, that idea that we can communicate with others?
It stayed with me, and it felt like such a relief because I felt like he was okay. Like he had been there. He knew that I wanted to communicate with him, and he was okay.
Thank you.
So yeah.
That's great. I love that. That's powerful, although I'm sorry for the experience that caused it. Somebody else who wants to jump in with a little offering, illustration, or question. I'm going to pick on someone for sure. Leona, go ahead.
Yes. I had a relative who was going through some issues, and I arranged to have this relative put into treatment. And I knew where the facility was. So on my way home, I stopped at the facility. And I wanted to see if they were going to need clothing or whatever. And when I was there, somebody came to the door and I was explaining who I was and who was going to be arriving. And I looked in a window and there was this person,
Hmm.
my relative. And I said, well, that's it. That's the one, So that was kind of a shock to me. And then when I came home, I went on to a trip to Africa where there was no communication. So I had no way of, and this relative was on my mind the whole time on my vacation, wondering, what was happening, if they were cooperating, when they were going to be discharged, And I had a dream that this person was discharged, and when I got home, I found out that happened.
Hmm. It's extraordinary because, thank you for that story. It's a good story. Because at first glance, many people look at the topic of spiritual experience and quite literally immediately assume it's superfluous, right? Meaning it's unnecessary, impractical, nice if you have it, but whatever. And yet, I find that more often than not, these things are informative, as in your story. Sometimes they're accurate in knowing things, physical things. And if nothing else, they leave us with an expanded sense of self and possibility that is healing. So that's a cool story about how big the mind is, really. So somebody else, how about a different story? Elisa, yeah.
Yeah, well, I got a couple of them, but I'll make it brief. Last year, I walked the Camino de Santiago, and I had truth and beauty experiences like every day, because I realized the more I was in the present, it would relieve my anxiety of what's going to happen moving forward through this trip. And I saw 3 little flowers with 3 butterflies on it and caught it in a picture. I would stop and the birds were all over the place. Every time I stopped, it was nothing but birds. I saw spirits in trees and in grapevines. It's like there's a face in this grapevine. You can see it in the trunk and everything. It's like just being present and being aware. There was all these little miracles all over the place. And
Yeah.
the other thing is, when I was a kid, I used to dream that I could fly. I would be like the flying nun and raise my head up, my chin up like the hat, and fly all over the place. And it was wild. I haven't captured it since, but I was a kid when I was able to feel that. And I thought that was crazy. I love that dream. I still remember the feeling of it right now. So those are a couple.
I love that. I love that. And actually, thank you. That reminds me of someone who I was thinking of here on our call, Barbara Boucher. You know, I know you love to travel, and I know you've been to some special places, and you don't have to speak up if you don't want to, but between, you know, the previous stories and then Lisa's story about the Camino and then me kind of thinking about you, Barbara, I thought, you know, for some of us, it is one of the reasons why we travel, because there's this, not only are we more relaxed, we're more curious, we're more open, and more than that, if we step into places where there's history or where there's sacred tradition, like you said, Lisa, the moments of truth and beauty are just everywhere. And we may dismiss it and not call it spiritual or religious, but it is profoundly spiritual. So Barbara, do you think I was thinking of you inappropriately, or will you confess to some of that? And you're on mute in case you want to speak up. Oops, you're still muted there. Can you unmute? Can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
No,
Yep. We hear you.
I guess not.
We got you. We can hear you. I think there's a lag. We hear you. We hear you. We can hear you. Oh no. She's unmuted again. Okay. We'll just have to maybe. Oh, you're there. You're there. We can hear you.
No, I can't hear.
Okay.
Okay, now I can hear. Can you hear
Yes.
me?
Yes.
Okay. Um, you know, thank you for acknowledging me, but the story I can share with you is years ago I went to see a psychic, and I remember her name was Bright Eyes, and actually she was the wife of a minister. And so we went into a room and she spoke to me and asked me why I was there. And I said, actually, I wanted to know my father a little bit more, who died when I was about 9 months old. Excuse me, my partner has just left me. And so anyway, I remember she went into this deep kind of trance. And she said to me, there's somebody in your life that you think about a lot, and she's like your mother. And she said, do you know who that is? And I said, no. And she said, her name is Nora. And Nora is the person who took care of me for the first 4 years of my life after my dad died. And my mother was not in the house much because she had to go to work. And that experience has stayed with me. And then she also said to me, you know, you look like your mother, but you're much more like your father in terms of personality. And so I've just remembered that whole experience. And the travel has opened up a lot of experiences for me. But interestingly enough, those experiences I find now are kind of fading with my aging process. Like I'm kind of disconnected in a way. That's okay. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Well, in terms of and we're going to squeeze another, we'll squeeze in another one or two here. I think in terms of things changing, I just want to expand on that for a moment. I will say for sure in my life, there are absolutely phases in which some of these experiences some of these categories are more common than others, right? So I feel like I had a window of time in my, I don't know, mid 20s to early 30s where there was a lot of spirit world stuff. And then even though I remain connected to that world, it's not the same, right? It's just not as visceral. It's not as sort of visionary as maybe it was. On the other hand, there have been other moments of my life where, let's say, experiences of ordinary magic seem to be more pervasive. So I do think it's quite normal for any of us to, first of all, be more attuned to some than others. Some of us are just kind of lucky and have like lots of ordinary magic experiences, or all kinds of things happen without even trying. But I think it's also true that we just kind of move through different ages and stages of life where we're more perceptive of some things than others, and then it changes. Now, I'm going to invite one of our invisible people. So whether that's Ashley, Ethan, Janet, or Jenny, and I know they may be off camera because they're doing something at the same time, or washing dishes, or driving, or whatever. But I just want to see if any of you would like to step in with a short story or a question. And if so, unmute yourself because I can't really see the look in your face. And if you don't answer in a minute, that's fine. But we're just going to see if anybody wants to come in. And not yet. So Barbara, we're going to go to Barbara Jurgen. Did you want, oh, I saw your hand was up, or maybe you were more just, that was the expression of waiting to see. Okay. Carrie, go ahead. Unmute yourself.
Okay. So, hi there, everybody. So last week when you were talking about some of this stuff, and it's now you put a name to it with, I guess, truth and beauty. But when I was a kid, I would have moments of euphoric acceptance of all. Okay, just when everything felt like it was, the pieces were together. Even, I mean, just everything was novel. Everything was a new thing, and everything was going my way. And then as I continued to, this was like 7, 6, 7, 8, 9, somewhere in there. And then, then life really started to change, and those moments became farther apart. And then when I remember that they come and go, but I don't have them very often anymore. And when I was a 30-year-old and I was a firefighter for a few years, I'd walk through the apparatus room where the fire engines were, and I would have that moment where I'd look at those fire engines, and I don't know if it was feeling proud of myself or the profession or helping or whatever, but I would have those moments like, wow, just this, the good, the bad, the reason I'm here, the opportunity, all that. But then now, as I'm 60, it feels like there's a lot more, just really a lot less of that. And so I'm wondering, I feel like I have to force myself to feel the truth and beauty, and then it's not really authentic because I'm, but I need to have some joy or some acceptance of this big marble full of darkness, really. And so, and then, but ordinary magic too, every day there's something wonderful that's off the charts unique, and this happened, and so I got to pay more attention. So anyways, it's more of a statement than a question, but I would love to have those euphoric moments without alcohol or other stimulation, other than just looking at something and feeling great about it.
Yeah. Wow. Actually, you said a lot more than you might realize. I think in our culture in the West, we tend to be so focused on the individual as the source of experience, that we look at that kind of formless spirit experience of children, in which they experience there's a certain magical universe that they live inside, which to me is a formless spirit experience. And we diminish it, right? We're like, well, that's kids, and kids have no worries and everything's new. But I don't think it's that simple. I think we are experiencing, as you said, an energy, an awareness, something that's really there. And one of the contributing factors is that young people have often less worries. They have a less formed identity, and they have less boundaries and barriers built up. Now, conversely, I think it's quite normal that many of us, are arguably most of us, as we move on through life, we contract and we have more identity. We have more experiences. We have more prejudices. We have more walls, even the most generous and liberal of us. It's just a function of moving through the world. And those modes of perception, change. Also very wise that you said, we can cultivate these things, but it takes effort sometimes. Like, we really got to get to that breathwork class or that energy healing session, because if we don't really go for it, it doesn't happen as easily. And then also, as you said, but it certainly helps to just pay more attention. And even, people talk about doing a gratitude sort of inventory at night. I mean, I think it's sometimes cool to do like a spiritual experience inventory, which is sort of like, well, what was kind of cool or magical today? Or what was a moment that was just, it's the other side of gratitude, which is what was I grateful for, and be in the savoring of that ability to experience. Now we do need to wrap up. We're on the hour, but I wonder if anyone has a 60-second offering. In fact, I wanted to ask Joni if you're able to be somewhat concise in light of time. And I want to ask you, Joni, not about your experience, because I have the luxury of knowing Joni, so I know a bit about your own experience, but you facilitate forest bathing for others. And I wonder if you observe whether it's really possible to facilitate environments where spiritual experiences are more likely, or is your experience telling us that it's just wishful thinking? Like, are there things that really do help people to have those experiences? I'm curious, and then we'll probably wrap up after that.
Yeah, I'll try to be real quick here. I mean, the basic premise of forest therapy and having, a trained guide is to invite people in nature to open up to their senses. And it's absolutely miraculous what people experience. And it's not me, it's not my fellow guides. It's a process, of bringing people into a space where they feel relative safety and peace and silence, and they're invited. Everything we do as a guide is an invitation. So you get to choose how much you open yourself up to. And, it's a combination of the surroundings, nature itself. Part of the saying for forest therapy guides is, nature opens the door. And it's powerful. And I observe people, in their 70s and their 80s who, haven't given themselves permission to be in a natural setting and feel safe, especially for women, and feel literally open up, your sight, your hearing, your taste, your smell, your sense of proprioception, where you are in this world. And when you do, it's magic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, beautiful. Well, it's a wonderful note to end on, because what it reminds us is that we often try to do all this stuff on our own. And not only do we need powerful environments like nature, but it does help to have a container or a guide. And as you say, it's not that the guide has all the answers, it's not that the guide is magical, but they do protect an energy and set a table, so to speak, or a path that we can then walk down. So thank you. Well, look, we've run out of time as always, as we always will, and I'm grateful for everyone here. We will be back next week, and I look forward to seeing you and maybe hearing from you. And as I promised, I will continuously promote the book. So if you are interested, pre-order 7 Gateways of Spiritual Experience today, and or share it, I don't know, social media or something like that. I don't really know what I'm supposed to say to promote it, but you get the idea. Spread the word, and I hope you're well. I hope you pay attention to your spiritual experiences, and we'll see you soon.
Cool.
All right.
Thank
Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye-bye.